In theory, vintage is defined as clothes that are 30 years at least in terms of age, or even older. But to me, it is clothes that were made in the past and have a certain standard of craftsmanship and quality, and they reflect the era that they come from. Vintage fashion is unique, it's sustainable, and it's fun. Vintage fashion, for me personally, is pieces that were made with a certain baseline standard of craftsmanship and tailoring. From a sustainability angle, it's one of the most cost-poor ways for you to get high-quality craftsmanship and uniqueness that you cannot find in the mass-manufactured fast fashion world. Material objects have a story to tell, and these are objects or pieces that come with a history, a life before you. The best thing about vintage is that it was really made to last. I collect as a wearable collector, so I wear the pieces I collect. I have no end goal in terms of the collection, I'm just enjoying the process. Because I also sew as a hobby, it allows me to repair and maintain pieces that people who don't sew might not be able to keep. It also does mean that I appreciate vintage and I focus on the construction and creation point a little bit more than the aesthetic sometimes. Some of the common misperceptions about vintage is that it should be cheaper because it's less desirable than a brand new piece, and that is often untrue because the piece is often rarer and harder to find, so the market value is frequently higher. Another misconception about vintage is that it's dirty, not because of its physical dirtiness, but because someone else used to own it. I find it quite funny, actually, that some people find vintage clothing weird because someone else used to own it. Buying vintage is like buying a piece of history. I find it quite interesting because I imagine who used to own this, what kind of lives did she lead. The 1950s and the 1960s are my favourite eras because of the silhouettes. I feel like they suit my body type. I feel like the general vibe or spirit that they have in terms of elegance and femininity appeal to me as aesthetic. One of my favourite pieces is this black seal Chapman because it was iconic in terms of the pleating and the very fitted runched bust work that was popular at that point, and then also the very nipped waist and the circle skirt. Another piece that is my favourite is something that was capitally pleated, so it's a 1960s frock, and that was a very popular genre and quite representative of fashion at that point. Another piece that I like is this Kelly Green Jonathan Logan silk boat neck dress, and I like it because the colours and silhouette is very representative of the 1950s era. The bright Kelly green. If you find something that you like, don't think twice, just buy it, because you might never see the piece again and you will regret this. For clothes to be considered vintage, and not just pieces that were from that decade, there must be some quality in the craftsmanship. The difference between second-hand and vintage is firstly time period, secondly the quality and construction of the clothing. I would tell someone who has not tried vintage to just try it, because if you find something that you really love, this is the start of an endless rabbit hole. Fashion is cyclical, but your taste is not. So you should keep the clothes as long as you feel that you enjoy them and you have a good purpose for them. My collection is probably past 500 pieces at this point. I collect a lot of Asian pieces in addition to the Western fashion pieces because it reflects my culture and heritage. I'm drawn to the cheongsam because I feel like that is really the best symbol of our history as someone who is Singaporean Chinese. I love wearing cheongsam because for me conveys a kind of elegance, and it also is a symbol of feminism for me in terms of the history of how it's constructed and popular. You can tell that it is a real cheongsam from the construction of the piece. The odds are that properly tailored cheongsam was fully hand finished. Vintage cheongsams, or pieces that were made with vintage tailoring techniques, often have closures from the side and actual closures with snap buttons, and that's a main giveaway on how you tell the age. There is a term in the vintage community called wounded birds, and these are garments that have some sort of damage or imperfection to them that require fixing to be wearable again. I have a soft spot for them because if you manage to fix it, you bring new life back to the piece. I like the 1950s, and a lot of pieces from the 1950s have cigarette marks because people used to smoke a lot more than they do now. And the one way to cover those marks is to embroider over them or to put a iron-on applique on them and then sew it down to cover it as though there's a pattern. If you find stains on the garment, you have to do a bit of a guess on whether you can remove it and what sort of stain and how old it might be. Usually something that looks like it's been there for a very long time might not be able to come out. Oxygen bleach and white vinegar generally does the trick for most things. The most common problem I have from maintaining my collection is that the seams and the hems are constantly undone. So you have to do it because if you let them be, more of the piece will come undone. Be prepared to do a lot of hand washing if you want to own vintage. If the piece is older than you, should show it some respect. I think vintage has taken over my life and my house to the extent where it's a bit part of my personality now and part of my identity, so it's not just a hobby. I will always continue to collect vintage for the rest of my life. It is about the process of collecting, about finding and repairing them that is enjoyable. It's not about reaching an end goal of a complete collection, it's the journey.